I used to walk around and say I don't judge anyone except for Christians.
I remember a magistrate saying, "You're not listening to anything we're trying to do, you're going to prison, son."
People are mysterious and also infinitely valuable in that way.
Then they tell you you'll probably be dead within 27 months.
From the Centre for Public Christianity, you're listening to Life and Faith. I'm Simon Smart. Well, when I was a little boy, I dreamt all the time, actually, of being an astronaut. I was fascinated by space travel. I used to read books about moon landings, and I was so into it and excited about the prospects. And I wasn't put off, at that point anyway, by the fact that I was terrible at maths and I get really bad claustrophobia. It took me a little while for that dream to be shattered, but it sort of left a legacy for me. And when I was told that someone who works for NASA was in town, I jumped at the chance to interview him. Dan Goods is a visual strategist from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or JPL. And what he does is really different from what you'd think someone at NASA does. So he's not an astronaut, he's not a scientist, he's not an engineer, he's a designer, an artist. While he was in art school, he had the chance to intern at Caltech, the company that runs JPL. And he found himself surrounded by scientists for the first time in his life. Here's Dan.
I wasn't all that great at school, so I felt a little, intimidated a little bit. But I was actually working with a guy who was a fine artist who was working with scientists, and he was coming up with new ways of visualizing data, and just being around people thinking about the big ideas that scientists think of, just was really fascinating to me and compelling. And so after that summer, I was like, I could go work for a branding agency or do advertising or something, but I want to work in this research sort of atmosphere where people are experimenting and thinking about new things, thinking about the future. And then I ended up getting this amazing opportunity to work at JPL.
And you do what? What do you told to do?
So I was given 6 months, and they were like, well, let's see if this works out. And now it's 14 years later, and I have a team, lead a team of artists, designers, thinkers, makers, and we do a couple different things. One we call it sneaking up on learning. So we create art pieces or design projects that are compelling, that are a little mysterious, that kind of draw you in, and then when you're there, you start asking questions, and then you're in the mindset for learning. Because if you just say, I'm going to teach you something, you're probably going to be like, no, don't teach me.
Well, that's because that was your attitude at school,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
So you got to find a different way to do it.
Exactly, yeah.
And
then the other thing we talk about is we help them think through their thinking. So we're not going to solve their equations. We're not going to solve, some crazy math thing, but we're going to ask them questions that they're not accustomed to their peers asking. And many times it's like the simple questions like, why should I care? And really, I think when these people are working on very complicated things, they don't think about those questions. They're thinking about the minutia of all the details, and sometimes they forget about the bigger picture of what they're working on.
You have a cool story about that, where one of those people said to you, what you did reminds him of why he does this work, right?
Yeah.
What was the thing? What was it?
So when I first got there, they were talking about finding planets around other stars. And 14 years ago, that was like, there was hardly any, there's only a few of them that had been found. Now there's about 3,500 that have been found around other stars, and that's just within a little teeny tiny area. And so, but then they would say, well, we're looking for a planet like Earth, and I was like, I don't know. But then they'd give me all these numbers of how big the universe was, and I didn't quite grasp it. So I had to create an experience for me to understand what they were talking about. So if you have a grain of sand, you have lots of sand here, and that represented a galaxy. A galaxy has hundreds of billions of stars in it. You need 60 rooms full of sand, about the size of this room, 60 rooms full of sand to show all the galaxies that we know about. And so I had one grain of sand, and that was our galaxy, so the Milky Way galaxy. And what was cool is I could have someone at JPL drill a hole a tenth of the size of the grain of sand into it. And so you look at it under a magnifying glass, and that little tiny hole is where we live, but it's also where we found these over 3,000 planets just within our little tiny area of our galaxy. So we're going to find tens of thousands more planets within that little teeny tiny area, let alone the rest of our little grain of sand, let alone, all the other ones.
Tell us some of the fun kind of art pieces you and your team have done to try and explain what NASA are doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've seen a couple on the web.
So one that people may have seen, David Delgado, a person on our team, came up with this idea of making travel posters to these worlds that we're finding. So these are real places, but they're really far away. Right, but much like in the 30s and 40s, there was this age of travel, and if you remember, there were travel posters that were really beautifully designed, and it was for an American like to go to Paris. So we took that motif and we applied it to these planets that we've found around other places. And so we tried to be travel agents. So we were sort of like the exoplanet travel bureau. And so one planet is called Kepler 16b. Kepler is the name of the spacecraft that found it. And it really does have two suns. And so that one, you have two shadows. So it's the land of two suns where your shadow always has company.
You're listening to Life and Faith from the Centre for Public Christianity. When I first heard about what Dan does at NASA, I immediately thought of Jodie Foster's character in the movie Contact. She plays this scientist who finds signs of extraterrestrial life and has chosen to make first contact. And there's this scene where she's out in deep space somewhere and she sees this beautiful celestial event, as she describes it. And she says,
No words to describe poetry. I should have said a poem.
Now I wonder is that what NASA employs you to do to some extent, sort of convey the beauty and the wonder of what's there, but only in a way that an artist could?
Yeah, I think people learn in lots of different ways, right? And some people need facts and figures, and other people need things that are in the heart. And we're always trying to do both as much as possible, to be able to touch the heart and the mind.
Yeah.
And if you can get both of those, then it's great.
What's most blown your mind by what you've seen that NASA is doing?
There's something called Einstein rings. So Einstein had this theory that gravity could bend light. And if you look at Hubble images, every once in a while you'll see like this little streak, and it's curved. And you're like, what's that? Oh, maybe it's something. Well, what's happening is that there's a giant galaxy, like right here, and there's a light that's way back here. And what's happening is the gravity is bending the light, and we just see that little streak. But with black magic math, I always say, they can reconstruct what that light actually is. And so it's like using a galaxy as a telescope. And there's a thought right now, there's the closest star to us is 4.2 light years away. There's a thought of taking a little spacecraft and going way out here and using our sun as this telescope to get a 1,000 pixel resolution image of the nearest planet to us. And to me, that just blows me away, right?
Right.
And what's even crazier is that depending on where that light is behind that, different things will happen. Sometimes you'll see that streak, but sometimes you'll see 4 lights, 4 little dots. And if you watch it over time, you'll see one get bright, next one get bright, another one get bright, another one get bright. What's happening is that it's taking longer for that light to get to this spot than it did to get to that spot. It's the same light. It's just taking longer to get there. And so you're seeing, different time periods happen. And it just blows my mind, right?
I think we tend to be struck by those sorts of things sometimes, but you're seeing it all the time, right? It's sort of in your face.
Yeah.
Human inquisitiveness is quite something, isn't it? And the ability of people to even come up with this stuff and is quite astonishing. Are you continually struck by that in the work you do?
Oh, totally, yeah. I mean, it's a very big open campus. People are always interacting with each other, and just seeing, oh, this is the person who figured out how to land on Mars. This is the person who figured out how to fix Hubble when it was out of focus. This is the person who, did that and other thing, and you just walk up to them and talk to them, and they're normal. They're normal people. They just happen to, be very brilliant in certain areas that allow them to do these things.
Your work is surrounded by the reality of hard facts, and they're very important hard facts. But you're also appealing to something mysterious, aren't you? Like it's less tangible than those things.
Yeah. Things aren't facts until they've measured them, and I think that's what drives a lot of the scientists, is that there is something mysterious and they want to figure it out. And I think that's a beautiful thing. If we had figured everything out, then life would be kind of boring, right? And what's great is we have a huge playground, to play in.
Are you more struck by the vastness of things, or the microscopic, or
both? I mean, they're both so bizarre. The universe is so big, and there's so many like dangerous things out there. Like you see these beautiful images of Hubble, but really it's like this super searing hot gas that's flying at super fast speeds across vast amounts of space, and like you wouldn't want to be there because you would be gone in a millisecond, right? But they look beautiful, right? And then you look down at the very smallest things that we can see, and how much space there is. And so like there are things that are flying through you and me that we can't see, but they're so small they just go right through you, like you're not even there. And that's a bizarre thing to think about.
Dan, you and some of your friends are part of this project, the Museum of Awe. What is that? Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, a lot of times I don't notice what's right in front of my face, and sometimes I need other people to help me see it. And so a friend of mine wrote me up, and he's like, Dan, there needs to be a Museum of Awe, and you need to run it. And I was like, what? But I was kind of busy, so I kind of brushed it off. But he was really adamant about it. And then I called up my buddy David Delgado and was like, what do you think about this idea? And we, over dinner, we started to think about, well, maybe the Museum of Awe, it's not like a normal museum where you go to the big marble museum type of place. Maybe you got to think about it as in, we live in the Museum of Awe. So the idea of the Museum of Awe is really to connect you back to, what is this place that we live in? The big, the small, the human, and so the idea is that it'll be a bunch of pop-up experiences. So they'll be in places that you would least expect it. Maybe it's in a skyscraper or an abandoned building, or something like that. And then it's a mixture of art and science, but theater. And the theater isn't one in which you like sit in a theater and watch people up on a stage. It's really where the musicians and the actors are surrounding you, and you're on the stage, and so you're part of that theater. And the hope is that at the end of this, that you're reminded of what a gift and what a privilege it is to be alive.
That's a great aim. It reminds me really of when you walk anywhere with a toddler. It takes a long time, right?
Yeah.
Not just because they're little and can't walk that well, but they're fascinated by everything around them, even the details of a leaf, for instance. And I think you are reminded of the fact that you lose that sense of awe, don't you?
Yeah.
Like as an adult, and you're a bit jaded by life, perhaps. But there's something wonderful about that. How do we recapture that sense?
Yeah. Well, in fact, so the museum, I remember some people, saying, well, this should be great for kids. And I'm like, they don't need this, right? They don't need this.
They're just in it every day.
A junior higher needs it, or a high schooler needs it, and the rest of us need it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's just looking at things just from a little bit different perspective, and one of I saw this video, I don't even know who did it, but it was this huge projection on a wall, and it was this giant yellow undulating, it looked like an alien was about to burst out of some egg or something like that. Just crazy thing. And then all of a sudden, it zoomed out and it went pop, and it was a corn kernel that turned into popcorn, but it was slow motion, and it was zoomed in so far that you had no idea what it was. And looking at it at that scale was like, it was transformative. It was like, I can't believe that's what a corn kernel looks like. I have this stuff all the time, and just looking at things from a little bit different perspective.
Is there something spiritual in what you're trying to do with the Museum of Awe?
I think it's hard to be in awe without there's some sense of the spiritual in it. I think awe many times has to do with vastness and things that are much bigger than yourself, and many times there's a sense of reverence involved in it, and that feeling draws you to something that begins to start a spiritual conversation. You may call it God, you may call it the universe, you may call it whatever, but I think it starts asking those questions.
Is awe then perhaps also connected to gratitude? You said earlier that part of what you're trying to do is to increase the sort of an appreciation for the gift of life. So I wonder, is gratitude connected to awe?
Yeah. Well, I almost got goosebumps on the back of my neck because when you said that, because a lot of people don't bring that up, the idea of gratitude, but when you have gratitude, you're open to awe. If you don't have gratitude, if you don't respect other things, I think it's hard to have awe. And so I think awe many times is the moment when you realize I'm not the center of everything, right?
And that's okay.
And that's okay.
Yeah, right.
And really, some people really need to hear that.
Yes. More awe, the better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. How do you think awe serves us as humans? Does it help us to flourish in some way? Is there something that gives us, like, perhaps even humility?
Yeah, well, I think part of it goes back to what we were just talking about of kind of giving ourselves some grounding, and realizing that we are not the center of everything. We are not the all-important, But I think I think with gratitude, it really gives you, and that, again, that's what our hope is that you look at life in a different way, and you go, life, there's beauty all around us, right? And I just have to look for it, and a lot of it is your mindset. Are you in the mindset for seeing beauty and wonder and the best in people, or are you in the mindset for only seeing destruction and the bad that's out there?
From the Centre for Public Christianity, you've been listening to Life and Faith. Our website is publicchristianity.org. You can find all our Life and Faith episodes there, on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Just type Life and Faith in the search box to find us. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating or review. It helps people discover our show. Next week, the director of the soon-to-be-released film Mary Magdalene.
Mary, you brought shame on our family.
There's something unnatural inside you. Your family says you grapple with the demon.
If there's a demon in me, it's always been there.
There are no demons here. Mary of Magdala.